This is preparation for you to take care of your sister's baby, my mother said, as if she were announcing the weather and not the demolition of my life, where my soft cream walls used to glow. A blinding zoo of neon giraffes and polka-dot elephants now screamed across the living room. Foam mats swallowed my wood floors. An unopened crib crouched in the corner, like a smug intruder. My father stood beside her, arms crossed. A satisfied project manager. Well, surprised? We rushed to finish before you came home. Surprise didn't even graze it. Boiling fury rolled through me. Hot enough to make the animal wallpaper vibrate. My name is Sarah. 12 hours earlier, I'd landed after a year of overseas volunteer work, clutching the keys to the first home I'd ever bought, with money I saved from college and 2 grinding jobs. This house was supposed to be the foundation for my next chapter work that used every skill I'd fought to earn. Instead, my castle looked like a daycare that lost a fight with a highlighter pack. Kelly, my younger sister, reclined on my sofa like a queen in a borrowed throne, one lazy hand circling her belly. When I heard you were coming back, she chirped. I thought perfect. We can skip paying for childcare. 2 birds, 1 stone. I didn't realize my life was the second bird. Explain. I said, my voice so flat and cold, it startled me. Mom's face pinched with disapproval. It means exactly what it sounds like. Kelly's due soon. You're single. Job hunting. And you have time. Family helps family. Helping isn't the same as breaking in and remodeling my house. I replied. This is a crime. You used a spare key I gave you for emergencies. This, I gestured at the chaos, isn't an emergency. It's entitlement with paint. Oh, you lack charm. Momsy had. The classic verdict, whenever I refuse to roll over. Kelly's going through so much. Can you not be difficult for once? There it was the script I'd lived under for years. Kelly wants. I sacrifice. Kelly stumbles. I catch. Kelly deserves. I disappear. Mia flocked. Somewhere underneath the shock, a quiet clarity clicked into place. I turned, grabbed my suitcase from the entry, and headed for the door. Where are you going? Mom shrieked. I paused just long enough to meet all 3 sets of eyes. Kelly's baffled. Dad's irritated. Mom's theatrical. To report a crime, I said, and shut the door on their outrage. The February air slapped my face awake. I called a cab and gave one address. Ben's. He's my partner and luck of the universe, a lawyer. When he opened the door, I didn't even make it to the couch. I folded into his chest and sobbed a year's worth of swallowed arguments. He said nothing, just drew circles between my shoulder blades until the tears burned out. When I could breathe again, I told him everything, the spare key ultimatum, before I flew overseas. The way my parents weaponized, we're family, to bulldoze boundaries. The wall of neon animals, now roaring in my living room. Ben listened like he always does, quietly, thoroughly. The way good people listen when they're deciding how to help you win. Sarah, he said at last, voice steady, eyes certain. You didn't do anything wrong. They entered without permission and altered your property. That's trespass and damage. Family doesn't erase the law. If you want to take action, I'll help you start now. He slid a notepad across the table, a simple checklist in clean block letters. Title deed. Photos of the original space. Call non-emergency police. Keep your tone factual. Don't argue feelings, document facts. I stared at the list, feeling strength seep back into my bones, like heat after frostbite. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't cruel. I was the owner of a home that had been hijacked under the banner of love. End Pell. That night, sleep refused me. But panic didn't own me either. I lay in Ben's guest room and traced the ceiling with my eyes, remembering why I bought the house so young. Not because I loved mortgage payments, but because I needed distance, literal, lockable distance from a childhood where my toys, friends, and choices were always community property. For Kelly, my parents called it kindness. It felt like theft, with a smile. Dawn grayed the window. Coffee steamed. Ben set the mug and the checklist beside my phone. "Ready?" he asked. My thumb shook once over the dial pad. Then I pressed call. 911. What's your emergency? I inhaled. None. Emergency. Please. I need to report unlawful entry and property damage. The suspects are my parents. And my sister. I'm the owner. The operator transferred me. I repeated the facts. 20 minutes later, a time was set. I ended the call and looked at Ben. "Good," he said softly. "Today you start taking your house and your life back." By late morning, 2 officers sat across from me at Ben's dining table. One older, calm-eyed, one younger, eager but careful. I handed over my deed, proof of ownership, and photos I'd taken before leaving for volunteer work. Cream walls, wooden floor, a simple, uncluttered space. The older officer nodded slowly. "This isn't just a family dispute," he said. "It qualifies as unauthorized entry and alteration of property. We'll need to conduct an inspection." The words landed heavy and electrifying. It wasn't just me screaming into a void anymore. The law itself recognized the violation. When we pulled up to my house, Ben's car in front, police cruiser behind, my stomach twisted. Yesterday, I'd run from this door, with rage clawing at my throat. Today, I returned with witnesses in uniform. Dad opened the door, already scowling. His irritation froze into something uglier when he spotted the officers. "What's this?" "I filed a report," I said, my voice steadier than my pulse. "Illegal entry, property, damage." Mom rushed into view, her expression flipping between outrage and mock injury. "Police? Sarah, are you out of your mind? We're your parents. We were helping." The older officer's tone was even. "Ma'am, your daughter is the legal owner. Entry without her consent, even with a spare key, can constitute trespassing. Altering the interior can be considered damage." And Dad's face flushed crimson. "Don't mess with us. We're family. What kind of permission does a parent need to step into their daughter's house?" His words cracked something inside me. Not because they shocked me, but because they were the purest proof of everything I'd always feared. In his mind, I had no boundaries, no rights, not even adulthood, just property wearing my face. He lunged toward me, finger stabbing the air. The younger officer stepped in, blocking him with a firm hand. "Sir, calm down. Any further action could be obstruction." Behind him, Mum launched into a performance fit for an awards show, clutching her chest and wailing about humiliation. Neighbours. Reputation. Kelly appeared last. Belly first. Rubbing it like a shield. "Sarah," she whimpered. "You'll stress the baby. How could you call the police on us? It was a circus. And I was the unwilling ringmaster. Yet beneath their noise, I felt an uncanny stillness settle in me. For once, their script wasn't working. Their guilt trips, their dramatics, their pleas, the officers weren't buying it. And neither was I. "I want the damage documented," I said clearly, facing the officers, "not my family. And I want the house restored." The officers photographed every corner. The garish wallpaper, the mats, the crib still taped shut. My father's protests dwindled into muttering. Mom sniffled. Kelly sulked. I just stood there, watching the camera flash, proved that this nightmare wasn't just family drama. It was evidence. Later, back at Ben's, my phone rang, like it had been cursed. First, Aunt Doris. Your mother is sobbing. Sarah, you've changed. People who abandon family never find happiness. Click. Then my grandmother. Voice frail. Don't drag this further. Your parents only worried about Kelly. Guilt disguised as love. Click. The coup de grace came from Dad. His voice. Calm now. Oiled with faux reason. We may have gone too far. Y apologisait. But really, how much to fix wallpaper? Instead, let Kelly use the room. We'll pay you rent each month. A fair deal. Right? I laughed, a sound sharp enough to cut glass. Rent? From you? I know how your promises end. This isn't about wallpaper. It's about trespass. About dignity. As long as you don't see that. There's no deal. From now on. Talk to my lawyer. End. The silence on the line was thick before he snapped. A lawyer? Against your own family? Yes. I said, because you've shown me I'm not family. I'm just a tool. Oh, my hand shook when I ended the call. But my chest felt steady. For the first time in years. Maybe decades. I wasn't defending myself with apologies. I was defending myself with truth. The battle had only begun. But the war was no longer theirs to script. The next few days blurred into a pattern. My phone buzzing. Relatives attacking. My parents shifting tactics. One call would be rage. The next would be weeping. The next, a reasonable compromise that sounded like a trap with ribbons on it. Ben's advice was firm. Stop answering. Every conversation was ammunition for them. Instead, I directed everything through the lawyer. He connected me with a sharp, unflinching woman named Claire. She didn't flinch at their theatrics. They'll try guilt, shame, and delay. Ignore the noise. We stick to facts. And facts were damning. They'd entered without permission, altered property, and then tried to coerce me into keeping the changes. Claire sent un formel demande. Full restauration cost. Due immediately. The response was classic. Dad outrage wrapped in victimhood. Why are you repaying our kindness with betrayal? We raised you. We paid for your school. We safeguarded your house while you played games overseas. And for safeguarded? The word made me laugh bitterly. They hadn't safeguarded anything. They'd gutted my walls with cartoon elephants. They'd turned my independence into Kelly's nursery. I replied only once. I will no longer speak with you directly. Contact Milovier. Oh, that single sentence shifted the power. They could no longer twist me into arguments or drown me in guilt. Now every word was filtered, documented, held up to law, instead of family duty. Of course. They didn't back down quietly. Kelly collapsed into melodrama, spreading rumors through cousins. Sarah made me cry so hard, I almost fainted. The stress could harm the baby. My parents echoed her script, painting me as the heartless older sister, poisoned by foreign ideas. Relatives called, non-stop, parroting lines, clearly fed to them. One night, the phone rang again. Caller ID. Dad. Against my better judgment, I picked up on speaker, with Ben and Claire listening. His voice was syrupy calm. Sarah. Reality check. We don't have the cash for full restoration. You're being unreasonable. But if you let us leave the nursery, as is, we'll pay you monthly. Think of it as rent. I didn't even blink. No. This isn't about rent. This is about violation. You don't get to negotiate away a crime. And his tone hardened. You're ungrateful. Do you know what it costs us to raise you? Who gave you a chance at university? Who took care of this house while you disappeared? That was their favorite weapon. Rewriting parenting as an invoice. Parenting isn't a loan. I shot back. If you think raising me deserves payment, you failed. As parents. And as for the house, you didn't take care of it. You vandalized it. That's what the law will say. I ended the call. My hand trembled. But my voice hadn't. Ben gave me a look of quiet pride. Claire only said, "That's Exhibit A." Oh, the following week. Claire escalated. A formelle restauration demande. Backed with photos, contacto estimates, and police documentation. The figure was ugly. Tens of thousands. My parents' retirement savings. The same pot they'd earmarked for Kelly's childbirth and baby expenses. If they refused, court awaited, and this time, they folded. Claire handed me the message with a faint smile. They've agreed to pay in full. No installments. Lump sum. Oh, it was retribution in its purest form. The money they thought would guarantee Kelly's soft landing was carved away to fix the damage they'd inflicted. Their greed had eaten their own safety net. When the contractor peeled off the garish wallpaper and restored the cream walls I'd chosen myself, I stood in the empty living room, inhaling the clean paint smell. The mats were gone. The crib was hauled away. Unused. My castle was mine again. For the first time, I believed it. The house was quiet when the last contractor left, leaving behind only the soft cream walls and the faint smell of paint. I walked barefoot across the bare floorboards, savouring the sound. No foam mats, no neon elephants, no crib crouching in the corner. For the first time since coming home, the space felt like mine again. I pulled out my phone, opened my contacts list, and scrolled. Mum, Dad, Kelly, aunts and cousins who had called to scold me, shame me, guilt me. One by one, I hit delete. Each press felt like unclipping a chain. By the time the list was clear, my chest felt lighter than it had in years. The doorbell rang. Ben stood there, smiling, a bouquet in his arms. "Congratulations," he said softly. "Your new beginning." I let him in. Tears stinging my eyes, not of rage this time, but of relief. We ate takeout on the floor, laughing at how the house echoed. For once, the walls weren't closing in. They were protecting me. A year passed. I filled those walls with my own memories, photos of children I'd met while volunteering abroad, framed certificates from my new career with an international nonprofit, little souvenirs from trips to refugee camps, where I now worked on education programs. Every detail reflected me, not obligations forced onto me. Life became steady, beautifully steady. Ben visited on weekends. We cooked modest dinners and planned our futures. I flew to conferences, designed projects, received a video letter from children overseas who thanked me in broken English. "Thank you, Sarah." For once, gratitude didn't feel like a demand. It felt like a gift. But my family? Their stories reached me anyway. Despite the blocks and silence, Kelly gave birth. Predictably, she couldn't handle work and childcare. She moved back with my parents, and together they stumbled into the role they'd tried to dump on me. Sleepless nights, endless diapers, retirement savings, shrinking to cover bills they never planned for. One cousin broke through my defenses with a message that included a photo of the baby. "Kelly is struggling. Maybe you should send a gift." I stared at the image. A new life. Innocent. Blinking into the camera. None of this was that child's fault. But my hand didn't move to reply. I closed the message and deleted it. Then came a letter, delivered through a lawyer, from my father. Words of apology wrapped around a request. Could we meet? Just once? But between the lines I saw the truth. It wasn't remorse. It was desperation. They wanted relief, not reconciliation. I folded the letter and slid it back into the envelope. Some choices weren't about forgiveness or punishment. Some were about survival. And for me, survival meant not reopening the door I had finally closed. That night, I sat on my couch, the couch I bought, in the home I fought for, surrounded by the cream walls I chose, and realized I was free. Family wasn't a cage I owed my life to. Family was whoever respected my boundaries, whoever celebrated my choices, instead of erasing them. And for the first time, I could breathe without permission. Spring sunlight streamed through my windows, illuminating the cream-colored walls that had once been suffocated by cartoon animals. The house was whole again. More importantly, I was whole again. I had fought my parents not just for paint and plaster, but for the right to own my life. And I had won. 1 year later, the evidence of that battle had faded, replaced by proof of a new chapter. Photos of smiling children from refugee camps lined the hallway. My desk held thick binders of project plans. For the non-profit, I now worked with education programs that carried me across continents. Each success built on the decision I'd made the day I dialed the police, to stop being their tool and start being my own person. But retribution has a strange way of arriving. News trickled through distant relatives. Kelly's baby was growing. Yes, but the burden had crushed my parents. With retirement savings gutted to pay the restoration costs, they were left scrambling. Sleepless nights. Constant argument. Finances stretched to snapping. The very role they tried to chain me into was now theirs. Without escape, it was poetic. Almost cruelly so. The castle they had mocked. They were now trapped inside. One afternoon, Ben came by with groceries and found me sitting on the floor, a letter in my hand. He knew without asking. From them, I nodded. My father's handwriting scrawled across the envelope. Words, dripping with a tone I recognized all too well. Apology as performance. He claimed regret, but the request beneath was obvious. Help us. Save us. Step back into the role we always planned for you. I slid the letter across the coffee table. It isn't an apology. It's a fishing line. Ben studied me for a moment, then asked the only question that mattered. Do you want to reply? I thought about it. About years of stolen choices. Of being lectured that family comes first, while my dreams came last. About the suffocating guilt calls from relatives. The nursery they forced into my living room. The nights I cried in Ben's guest room, wondering if I was heartless for fighting back. And I thought about now, about waking up in my own house, filled with my own work, my own joy, about standing in refugee classrooms overseas, hearing children laugh, feeling the echo of my own freedom ripple through theirs. I shook my head. No, some bridges shouldn't be rebuilt. They were rotten from the start. Ugh. Ben reached over and squeezed my hand. Then that's your answer. Oh? I tossed the letter into the fireplace. Flames curled the paper until the words turned to ash, carried upward by the draft. Watching it burn, I felt the final weight lift. I hadn't just reclaimed my house. I had reclaimed my life. And the retribution? It was simple. My parents were living the exact nightmare they tried to hand me raising Kelly's child. Exhausted and drained, with no one left to exploit. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. I simply chose not to participate. That was revenge enough. Later that evening, as twilight settled, Ben appeared at the door with a bouquet of tulips. To your castle, he said. Handing them over, I smiled, placing them in a vase on the windowsill. The petals glowed in the last light of day, a reminder that I had built something stronger than blood ties, dignity, independence, and a future that belonged only to me, because family isn't who shares your roof. Family is who respects your walls. And in this house, my house, I was finally irrevocably free.